Welcome into the Edward Jones Chatting Cage. Tim McMaster here. This, of course, your chance to get FaceTime with your favorite ball players, former ball players, and broadcasters. And that's who we have stepping into the cage today. Cardinals broadcaster and former Cardinal player Rick Horton. Rick, thanks a lot for joining us.
Tim, glad to be with you today. This is a red-hot Cardinal team warming up here behind me, and it's been a fun start to the season.
All right, fans know how this works. To get involved, to get your question into Rick, you can either press that red button at the bottom of your screen, you get some FaceTime, get on and ask Rick your question yourself, or use the hashtag Chatting Cage, and we'll get the question into Rick via Twitter. And that's where we're going to start today. And Rick, Barry Lee on Twitter wants to know, what has surprised you the most about this Cardinals team this year?
Well, I think the biggest surprise to me has been the bullpen. I mean, the bullpen has been really an important part of the Cardinals over the years. You know, how good are you in the sixth inning and beyond? But Jordan Walden, who's hurt right now, has been kind of the eighth inning guy. But when you look at innings 6 through 9, it's really been shut down. Their numbers have been extraordinary. You have kind of role guys like Matt Belisle and Carlos Villanueva who've stepped in and been unhittable. And, I think there was some questions about how deep the Cardinals bullpen would be this year. You thought the offense would be good, the starting pitching would be good, but I think the bullpen's been a bit of a positive surprise.
Yeah, it's amazing how this team continues to just plug guys in, and obviously they go with the youth and plug those holes when they need them. All right, we have a fan on the line now. If you can just tell us your name, where you're from, and ask your question for Rick.
Yeah, I'm Andrew. I'm from Chesterfield, Missouri. And my question is, what have you noticed about the Cardinals' offense this year as compared to last year, where they struggled to get runs?
Well, that's a great question, Andrew, because if you watch the Cardinals a year ago, they were not as good with runners in scoring position as they were 2 years ago. But no team on the planet was, and I'm sure being from St. Louis, you know that 2 years ago they set records as far as runners in scoring position. But what I've seen this year is I've seen the Cardinals, they've been a little more aggressive early in the count. I think that's what I'm seeing. So, this is a game where everybody talks about on-base percentage and you want the walks, but even a Matt Carpenter, who is terrific at hitting deep into a count, he's had a lot more hits first pitch, second pitch. So I think there's been maybe an adjustment to be more aggressive, especially with that fastball early in the count.
All right, Rick, we're going to go back to Twitter, and obviously you get to call games in one of the best environments in all of baseball there at Busch Stadium in St. Louis. But MLB Love wants to know, what's your favorite road ballpark to visit?
Oh, boy, I love this question. And, of course, I love St. Louis and had my years playing here. But a couple of places I love to go. One of them is New York. I grew up watching games at Shea Stadium in New York as a kid. And so in some ways, when I'm at Citi Field and when I was at Shea Stadium, that was really the big leagues to me in a way that only, I guess, a player would know as you go back and reach back to your childhood. But some of the ballparks that I like to go to, I think, San Francisco, that's just a terrific stadium and a terrific view. I actually love to go to Pittsburgh, too. Something about that ballpark and the scenery of downtown Pittsburgh, and we're there a lot. Those are maybe two of the ones that I think about. Of course, Wrigley Field and the history in Chicago would be on that list, too. There's really a lot of differences when you go from city to city. It's part of the fun of it.
And obviously, when you get to go to Wrigley with the Cardinals, there's that rivalry, and I think there's a little extra electricity that comes into play with the Cubs and Wrigley. We're going to go back to Twitter right now, and Bob Tucker, 34, wants to know, who was the most interesting player that you ever played with, Rick?
Oh, wow. I played with some interesting players. Joaquin Andujar is the first one that comes into mind, and to call him interesting might be an understatement because Joaquin was from some other planet, but a tremendous teammate and a great competitor. I look back and think about the Hall of Famers I got to play with, and so I guess as you get out of the game and you realize that it's been so long ago since I had a chance to do it. Now you're in broadcasting. I think back at the great personalities, the Hall of Famers that I was around. Whitey Herzog, Tommy Lasorda, being around Carlton Fisk when I was with the White Sox, being with just tremendous players in L.A., Oral Hershiser and Kirk Gibson. I think back at these great players, and Willie McGee I think is one that I think interesting would be a good word for Willie McGee too. The most humble guy that I've been around in this game, and anybody that's played with Willie would say that about him. The perfect teammate, the great player, but also the humble guy. And so, I have a lot of great relationships from guys I played with and played against that go on to this day. It's pretty nice to continue those.
Yeah, and you played for some pretty special teams, Rick. I know you went to 3 World Series in your career. You won 1, obviously, with the Dodgers, but went to a couple more with the Cardinals. All right, we're going to bring in another fan now, and if you can just tell us your name, where you're from, and go ahead with your question for Rick Horton.
I was just wondering, I hear a lot of accurate and perceptive observations that you guys make in the booth about what's happening on the field. How much of that makes it to the team that you see the stuff you see that they're not catching, or is there someone on staff that already knows that before you guys even know it?
Boy, that's a great question. I actually just had a conversation with one of the Cardinal personnel about this exact subject, and I think he and I would both agree, and that the players, the clubs don't miss anything. The video capacity that they have now, number of players, people working for the club that are checking out every player in baseball. He said, and what his comment was, there's no secrets anymore, and I believe that wholeheartedly. So what I try to do, and I think a broadcaster ought to try to do, is get that information from the guys who work for the team and try to bring that as public as you can. Now, there's a lot of information they don't want people to know. If they believe a particular player is not reacting well to a slider, they're not necessarily going to tell me that, so I tell the whole world that, so he hears it. So that's part of the rub of this, but I don't think anything gets by these coaches. It's become a 24/7 job for them to be on top of the details, and we get reams and reams of numbers and materials and all that, but the best way I can prepare for a game is stand behind the cage behind me and talk to the guys that are playing it and have played it and are making the adjustments day in and day out.
Yeah, there's all the sabermetrics, but having a few conversations doesn't hurt as well, definitely. This is the Edward Jones Chatting Cage. You can get in line, press that red button at the bottom of your screen, and we have a fan on the line right now. Just tell us your name, where you're from, and go ahead with your question for Rick.
Hi, Rick. How you doing? This is Matt from Pittsburgh. Just wondering, what do you make of the NL Central this year?
Matt, I appreciate that question. We just saw your Pittsburgh Pirates, assuming you're a Pirate fan, here in town, and they're going to get better. I think that's where I would start. And even though they're playing .500 baseball right now, I have great respect for Clint Hurdle, a former teammate of mine, really good friend of mine, and he has found a way to make the Pirates a good team every year, and I just wouldn't count them out. I think Liriano's a tough pitcher. Their bullpen can be nasty, and that lineup is formidable too. So I suspect Pittsburgh will be in it. Cincinnati has got so many injuries right now. That's going to be a hard team to handicap, I think. Milwaukee, of course, going through the change of management is also kind of a hard team to talk about. But the Chicago Cubs, who are here in St. Louis right now, that is one good team. They're young, yes. Is their starting pitching as good as the Cardinals right now? I don't think it is. But the Cubs could get on a roll, and if those young guys continue to mature, they're going to be a handful. I think most people would have predicted that this is the Cardinals' division to lose coming out of spring training. I don't think anybody would change their mind about that, considering the Cardinals are off to the best start in franchise history through the first 26 games of the season. But I think the main competition right now, as I see it, is going to come from Pittsburgh and perhaps Chicago.
All right, Rick, we have another fan already ready to go. If you just tell us your name, where you're from, and go ahead with your question.
I'm Carson. I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm a pitcher in Babe Ruth, and I want to know how, I want some advice on how I can get better with pitching.
Oh, Carson, that's great. One of my favorite topics, talking to young people about pitching. And one of the things, I was a pitching coach for the Indians for a couple of years in minor leagues, and it also worked with my son's buddies and along the way. And one of my favorite things to say about pitching is, Carson, when you get on the mound, act like you know what you're doing, even if you don't. I mean, I could tell you there's some times where that was the case with me. I think there's an important aspect of pitching, which is the attitude and the confidence. So when you stand on the mound, act like you know what you're doing, and no matter what the next pitch is that you throw, act like that's what you meant to do. And it's really a mental part of pitching that I think is underestimated. It isn't just about the stuff that you have. I think at some point, if you're in your mid-teens, you're probably at the point of working on different pitches, and of course that's part of it, commanding the strike zone. And I'd tell you something else, Carson. as a big league pitching coach, they go out and tell big league pitchers to throw strikes. You tell 8-year-olds to go out and throw strikes. So it starts with that. First pitch strike is the best pitch in baseball. So command, working on command and accuracy, focusing on that mentally, but also working on that confidence factor. So when things go bad, and they're going to, if you're a pitcher, it's going to happen. When something goes bad, you don't kind of implode and kind of give up. So confidence, and as far as arm strength, my third point would be you build arm strength by throwing. Long toss is something that I'm an advocate of. Most baseball people are. Just throwing long, having a catch with somebody at a long distance, not to hurt your arm, but to strengthen it and build it up.
That's great stuff for Carson and really any young pitcher out there from Rick Horton. Rick, I'm going to let you continue to think back on those playing days. Going back to Twitter, Redbirds99 wants to know, what do you remember about your draft day when the Cardinals selected you?
Oh, wow. What I remember most about my draft day was the joy of telling my grandmother that I was drafted by the St. Louis Cardinals. My grandmother, who passed during the World Series in 1985, was a Cardinal fan in New York. She'd watched Stan Musial play in the 40s or early 50s, I guess, and she just fell in love with Stan Musial. So half my family, my extended family, were Cardinal fans and half were Met fans growing up in New York. And so when I got drafted by the Cardinals, it was an absolute dream come true for her. And, you know, you never knew. There were 26 teams at the time, so, yeah, I had no idea the Cardinals were interested. So to be able to let her know that I was going to get a chance to be a professional player with the Cardinals was an extraordinary moment. And I sent her a photo of Red Schoendienst, Stan Musial, and me in this Cardinal dugout, not this one, but the old stadium behind me. And that was a prized possession of her. And again, she passed during the World Series, but had a chance to see me in the World Series with her favorite team. So that was a very special moment for me.
That's excellent. That Cardinals tradition is really amazing in baseball. All right, Rick, now it's time for our EDJ question of the day. And the question is, what's been the key factor in the Cardinals having the best record in baseball to this point?
I think starting pitching is the biggest factor. The offense has been very, very good. In fact, the offense is second in the league in hitting right now, fourth, maybe third in slugging percentage through today. So the offense has been great. I think you got a lot of things working. I mentioned the bullpen earlier, but starting pitching is still kind of king, I think, in this game. If you've got guys day in and day out that are going 6+ innings and giving you a chance to win, even the games that the Cardinals have lost, they've only lost by 1 or 2 runs. So they're in every game. And I think the starting pitcher's job is to keep you in the game. And when you look at Lance Lynn, Michael Wacha, a resurgent Michael Wacha in that rotation. Of course, Wainwright is out. But this has got John Lackey, a lot of October experience, but also a veteran guy in that rotation as well. This is a good Cardinal staff. Carlos Martinez, young guy, did not have a good outing last time, but for the most part, he's been right on time too. So I think starting pitching is really the key for me.
Yeah, and that starting pitching just year after year for the Cardinals has been impressive. We are out of time, Rick, but thank you so much for taking the time to join us here in the chatting cage.
Enjoyed it, Tim. I appreciate this opportunity very much. Good to chat with you.
All right, join us again next time on the Edward Jones Chatting Cage.